Hey friends, it's Jeannie and I am back today to share another gnome card. And this month's theme is for Valentine's Day. It'll be lovey-dovey and pink. So I am using the Simon Says stamp Gnome and She Gnome along with Honeybee Stamp's Whimsical Heart Stencil. For my card today, I am using a piece of A2 black cardstock and I've masked off about an inch on the bottom portion of my card panel. I am inking it up with picked raspberry Distress Oxide ink because Distress Oxide inks have a pigment quality to them, and so they are able to show up on dark cardstock. And because it's for Valentine's Day, I decided to go with a ton of pink colors. Once I finish the ground portion, I'll mask that off and I will be using the Honeybee Stamps Whimsical Stencil. It has all these little hearts on it and it's so pretty. I went ahead and pulled out my Ink on 3 Sharktooth White Atelier ink, which also has that pigment quality, and I decided to kind of color up the background with that. And once I did that, I didn't cover up the entire area, but I just kind of did like a diagonal. And then once I did that, I pulled up the stencil, moved it a little bit over, and it'll be offset. So I'm going to go in with Ink on 3's Atelier Sweet Petunia Pink ink, and when you put these inks on top of white, the color really shines through. It's not as chalky as Distress Oxide inks, so there is a difference of the two colors. Once I did the Ink on 3 ink, I also pulled out the Distress ink just to kind of amp up the pinkness of it, if that makes sense. It just really added a bit of dimension to the hearts itself. I kind of kept it on the edges of the hearts, and I really liked how it turned out. Ink on 3's Atelier ink actually gives it a little bit more pink to the color, and so you'll see at the ground I am adding that ink because I wanted it to be a little bit more vibrant with the pink. So if I were to put white at the bottom and then put the Sweet Petunia pink on top, it would be very pink, but in this case I already had the picked raspberry Distress Oxide ink at the bottom and I didn't want to like ink it up too much, so I just went over it with the Sweet Petunia pink and it just kind of upped the pink color to it. It's very subtle. This whole background is very subtle because I wanted the focus to be on the gnomes, but I thought that that just added a little bit more pink to everything. For the gnomes themselves, I pulled out the gnome and the she gnome, and the gnome is actually almost as tall as my card panel, which is 4¼ I cut out all the different pieces along with using some pattern paper from Not Too Shabby and a bunch of my scraps. So I've been using up my scraps, which is great. I have a ton of them and I am trying to get through them because last year I had this whole thing where I wasn't going to buy any more paper except for the essentials, and guess what? I still have a ton of paper left. This year I'm going to try to use more pattern paper in my collection just to get rid of it. I realize I just don't really use it that much and I don't want to just toss it, so I'm going to incorporate them into my cards. I am doing a little bit of Copic coloring. I am coloring up the two noses, the beard, and the little pigtails. So I'm going to go in with some RV pink markers and add a little dimension to the hair and the gnome just by flicking some color onto the areas where it needs to be shaded to give it a bit of dimension. So these colors are very bright, but I picked the lighter colors so it's not too bright and it won't take away the focus from the gnomes themselves. But I thought it'd be fun just to make this a very pink red Valentine's themed card. So once I go in with my darkest color, I will blend everything out. The RVs are a little hard to work with. I think I've mentioned them before. They are very bright pink. They kind of pick up the color once you put it down, and sometimes they're a bit hard to blend, but this combination of RV00, RV RV02 and RV04 actually works out really well, and I like how it turned out. Once I add the darkest color, I'll just blend everything out again, and I think that lately I've only been doing it kind of once, so I'll go in with the darkest, go to my mid-tone, and then go to my lightest. But for the beard, because I knew that these colors don't blend so well, I started out with the lightest, worked my way to the darkest, and then worked my way back to the lightest. Sometimes you kind of have to just get familiar with the markers that you're using and the different qualities that they might kind of have. They're all Copic markers, but sometimes the colors and the pigments just don't blend as well with each other. So you kind of learn that aspect of it as you color more and more. I have everything ready. I will be just using liquid glue to put everything together. And I was pretty careful putting these together because the base of the gnomes have an outline of white which peeks through on the edges, and it's kind of like putting together a puzzle piece. So if you have it a little off-centered, the entire thing will kind of become off-center as well, which happened to me last month when I created my gnome cards for the New Year's. But I also think that no one will notice if they're a little off-center, and these are actually just really fun to put together. So originally I was going to fill in the little clothes patterns with the hearts and the dots, but it's kind of tedious because they're so small, and so I decided that I wanted to leave them white. So the base of the gnome itself is just peeking through the clothes, and it just looks like a pattern, so I left it as is. I thought that it was fine because I didn't want anything to really clash with the pattern that I cut out for their hats, and I thought that that was really pretty. I am kind of loving the subtle pattern paper. I think that when there are really busy backgrounds, it kind of takes it away from the dies, but I have been really enjoying creating die cuts for cards because it's really easy. You just cut them out and then you glue them all together and then you have a card. Normally I do love coloring, but in this case I have been loving these gnomes, which is why I'm going to feature them each month because it's something that I have in my stash. They're pretty inexpensive, and I think that it just works for any occasion. So I'm going to be taking you through the holidays with these gnomes. So for the sentiment itself, I actually pulled out Trinity Stamps Gnome One Like You, and there was this sentiment I wanted to use. The stamp set comes with a coordinating die, and these sentiments are cut out around the font, and so it's not like just a straight strip or anything. It's kind of nice because it cuts around the font, and it does make it a little bit difficult to stamp. So what I will do is I will die cut the sentiment on a piece of white paper and then use a piece of washi kind of to hold that piece, stamp it, and then I'll be able to get it perfectly centered on the die cut. And for the sentiment itself, I actually trimmed it down because I wanted it to fill up the space in the top left-hand corner and then the bottom right-hand corner, and you just need a pair of scissors to trim it down, and it works really well, especially because that gnome's hat is so large and he's so tall that the sentiment would look a little weird right on top of it. So I also added a few heart embellishments, and once I glued everything down, this card is complete. I think it turned out so cute and so sweet. That background is very subtle, so the gnomes really pop, and I really like that I picked the red outfit for them because it didn't take away from the gnomes' hats, and the little heart embellishments that I have really match with their clothes. That's it for this month's card featuring the Simon Says stamp gnomes. I hope you're enjoying this series because I think it's pretty fun to take them throughout the year and kind of create cards using all the holidays. I hope you have a great Valentine's Day, and I will see you guys next time for another video. Bye!